AI is already in our children's lives. It's in the classrooms, search engines, in our homes, social media, entertainment, apps, and increasingly in the conversations children are having with technology. But here's the question: who is protecting our children's privacy while the technology is being developed? And what happens when a child begins trusting an AI system, sharing deeply personal information with it, and using an AI system that was never designed with a child's developmental needs in mind? Today, we're joined by, and I am completely honored, everybody, Brendan Bouffard, Associate General Counsel for AI and Privacy at Fairplay. Great colleagues of ours, great friends of ours. Brendan is also a father, most important job in the world, who homeschooled his own children. Gold star for you. So he understands this issue not only as an attorney and policy advocate, but as a parent. The website is fairplayforkids.org. We will have, Brendan, all of the information in the body of the video, everything ever from the time you were born about you. But I want to get right to it. So, Brendan, welcome to the Warriors.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's a great honor. I'm excited.
Well, I want to jump right in. And I'm going to start with, why did you want to become an attorney?
Oh man, becoming an attorney.
Probably a loaded question.
Yes. See, I had quite a meandering path to this particular job as an attorney. So I started out as a journalist, and I worked for a local paper in Michigan, where I was born and raised, and actually started out wanting to be an environmental lawyer. So I went to law school to do that. But my wife is a family physician, and so I followed her to Northern Michigan for her residency. We ended up having 2 kids during her residency. And so I ended up sort of taking time off from trying to be an attorney to be a stay-at-home dad, to help her, be able to work 80 hours a week and still have some sanity. And eventually that process, kind of getting into both, raising my kids as a stay-at-home dad, but then later during COVID, transitioning into homeschooling for several years with them, kind of got me into thinking about tech, and specifically tech business practices, because of looking into how our educational system works and some of the educational technology that was being used in the schools, as I kind of really, push myself into understanding how our curriculums developed, how kids learn effectively, what sort of resources they need to thrive, and what are the barriers to letting them grow into who they're supposed to be.
That's an excellent answer. So now you do know how hard it is, with kids at home, right? And doing all that. It's a tough journey, but the most necessary in today's world, I think. When my kids were little, which, they're like your age, homeschooling, that was never even a thought. Right? None of that. And we didn't have anything with EdTech. So I escaped all of this. But as a grandmother now, I am very concerned. Let me ask you something. Why do you want to share anything about being, when you were a stay-at-home dad? Obviously this, as you pointed out, shaped your thinking today, right? With a lot of...
Yeah, certainly. I think the interesting thing for me is, I always wanted to do something in the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of more of a personal anecdote here than advice. But I knew I wanted to do something in the nonprofit space. I wanted to be an environmental lawyer. That was what I started out being. But when my daughter was in kindergarten, this was just before COVID, she was a really great student. And I remember we had her coming home from school a couple days at the beginning of the year, kind of really upset and sort of crying about this situation she was having with math at school. And, we were trying to figure out what was happening, and we figured out that there was a application that the school was using, an EdTech product called Prodigy. And this was kind of it's super gamified, kind of like an RPG, like a role-playing game, where students would battle each other and for points, and they could have, all the stuff that would come along with a gamified app, skins and player power-ups and that sort of stuff. And she was a good math student, and we were trying to figure out, why was this game upsetting to her? And what we found out was that this application that was supposed to be free, was supposed to be ad-free to the school, wasn't supposed to be marketing to kids, was, essentially had an agreement with the school that they wouldn't market to kids during the school day, but they were giving kids notifications and sort of bonuses if they logged on after school. And when they logged on after school, they would then sell them a premium subscription that would give their, player in this game additional capabilities. And so you had students who paid for a premium subscription were able to win these sort of math battles against kids who didn't have the premium subscription. And the district that we went to was a very mixed income district. And I remember just being, more than anything I had done in my work, in my career previous to that, like more angry than I think I've ever been. It was like the situation, just thinking about the fact that we already have, disparities in our school system as it is. And to think that kids who could afford a premium subscription would then reinforce the idea that they were better at math or that they should be moving into STEM careers, whatever, however you want to have it, was so frustrating to me. And it seemed like such a exploitative thing to do to kids that were as young as kindergarten. So it was like sort of one of the first encounters that I had with how these business models operate and how those business models can lead to these downstream harms. I happen to find that Fairplay had written a complaint to the Federal Trade Commission about that specific business practice, and that's how I ended up starting to follow Fairplay's work and getting really into tech reform. And it was just an eye opener to what is happening in the schools. We went to the schools ourselves as parents, and we tried to talk to them about getting it out of the classroom. Most of the teachers, the administrators had no idea that this was even happening, no idea who could even approve or disapprove whether this app would be in a classroom, and sort of kind of threw their hands up about it. And that's it was kind of an eye opener that these are systemic problems that need systemic changes. And flash forward several years later, we pulled our kids out of school during COVID and ended up selling everything we owned, traveled around the world, did a bunch of our own curriculum design for them. And when we kind of came back and re-entered the professional world for myself, my kids were a little bit older. I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to land at Fairplay doing this kind of important work. Since that time, we've had new AI system design. We've had the phone-free schools ban process that happened across the country. We're having incredible gains in, I think the movement to reduce overall reliance on EdTech in schools and overall screen time in schools. So it's been a cool journey so far, but work's kind of still getting started.
Well, I feel like just in the last year, we've had tremendous movement. The last 18 months. With a lot more parents. I mean, due to Fairplay, due directly to work you do, due to organizations and just the awareness. America is pushing back. I mean, I travel the country. They don't like all of this with our kids. I don't care what big tech says, because we know the big tech playbook. It's about them, right? So, or blaming parents, but so we ignore that. But I think I have seen personally so much movement. I want to share with you, I was on a Zoom last week, taking it in, and it was about 200 teachers, okay, expressing from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of schools, but completely expressing frustration that they're forced into using these things. They're forced now into AI, which nobody's understanding what that playbook is in the classroom. Nobody's educating them, educating the parents. And again, I feel bad for a lot of these teachers because this is their livelihood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are saying like, we're forced to go along, but this group is like, we've got to start pushing back. Do you have anything to say about that? Like, what are you hearing about that? Because I was very surprised when they said, look, we got to start really pushing back against this. But what do you know that I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a baseline, both through the phone-free schools process and then now sort of in this more greater EdTech reform process, I think it's like very obvious when you talk to any teacher that like these teachers are doing the absolute best that they can, and they have what's best for the students in mind when they're making these decisions. I think in the phone-free schools landscape, that was very clear in having the teachers siding with advocates to push those state laws through to ban phones in schools was like such a crucial component. The teachers were, maybe the most important factor in getting districts to understand it, getting state legislators to understand that this is a huge problem and it needs to be addressed. On the ed tech side, it's a little bit more split. There are lots of teachers that understand that these ed tech programs are not working for them. They don't want to have to use them as much, especially in the lower grades. Many states require students to take their tests on computers, even in the lowest grades in K through 2. And we speak to teachers who know that doesn't work. They can see that their students are struggling with the test taking, that it's not reflecting the actual progress that student's having. But at the same time, you have teachers who, have kind of bought into this. And I think on the ed tech side of things, it's going to be a trickier process in coming to some sort of an understanding with teachers, because there are like a lot of teachers who genuinely believe that it's better for students to use these programs. And these programs are not, one size fits all, like, obviously. For example, I'm in a ed tech stakeholder group in my own district. And I remember we're doing a sort of a small working group activity where we felt like the district did not have very good data to understand whether a particular reading platform, like an ed tech reading platform, was working. It looked like there were basically no movement in the scores, but not enough data to understand whether or not getting rid of the program would help. And that was my position. It's like, we should just get rid of this program. If we don't know it's working, why are we even using it? So I suggested, well, just as a casual idea, throwing it out in this brainstorming session, why don't we allow teachers who don't want to use this program to not use it? And then at the end of the school year, we'll have several classrooms that didn't use the program and several classrooms that have, and we can see which one's working. And, one of the teachers was in this working group. It was an older classroom teacher, not an early ed teacher, was adamant that if we did that, it would be like an ethically bad thing to do, a morally bad thing to do, because we would be depriving the students in that sort of control group of teachers who didn't want to use this program. We'd be depriving them of this ed tech, and that would be bad for them. So we can't run this experiment. So the idea that these platforms are helpful and necessary in education in many teachers and many educators, it's still there. And I don't mean for this to sound patronizing in any way. I'm not an educator myself, but I will say that this is a deeply ingrained thing that is built on years and years and years of ed tech companies pushing sort of misleading studies, having account executives going from school district to school district, making promises about educational achievements that don't line up, from pushing Chromebooks and iPads in schools from kindergarten up. And it's almost like hard to envision, both for parents, for educators, and for students, a world where this technology isn't just fully ingrained in every aspect of life during the school day. So I try to show some patience and show some grace and understand that, like, I have good faith that all of the teachers and all the administrators are genuinely working for the best interests of kids. And it's just going to take a lot of sort of engagement with all of the groups that are involved in this, parents, teachers, students, everybody, to find a way to reduce the reliance on these applications, because the fact of the matter is that they're not working. The annual spend in K through 12 education for ed tech platforms is $30 billion. And that's not working.
There's the push. Bottom line is money. So.
Exactly. It's not working. It's not helping. It's causing more harm than good. Yes. And every dollar that goes, into that $30 billion budget for ed tech platforms is a dollar that's not going towards teachers, towards in real life, towards field trips, towards support programs for students in need. And we need to think really strongly about how we can better allocate those resources to help our kids.
Let me ask you something. To your knowledge, do parents have a say in what kind of ed tech is bought, like for the school district, or they just go ahead and do it and put it in the classrooms? I just thought of that question, actually.
I think it's a answer on a spectrum, I guess. So I'm sort of that really grassroots democracy side of things. I guess all parents have a little bit of a say in being able to go to the school board, to be able to schedule a meeting with their district superintendent and shout at them about what's happening in their classroom. In my district, for example, I worked in the stakeholder group and was so frustrated with the progress that we had that I ended up having to FOIA my own school district to figure out what applications were being used in the classroom. That was the level of sort of access to information I had, essentially zero. I had to legally require them to give me this information. Some school districts are more open to working with parents, but generally no. The general interpretation of the way that our laws work, or the way that schools interpret it so far, is that like they don't need to get consent from parents to deploy these programs into classrooms. They consent on the behalf of parents under COPPA for under 13s. For over 13s, they don't need consent at all, unless there's a state law that requires it. And so you have a situation where schools have generally taken the position that it would be too difficult or burdensome to figure out a way to have 4 or 5 kids out of 25 not using a particular program during, for whatever purpose they're using it for. And so the desire to have uniformity across how a teacher is presenting, a lesson in class, or, orchestrating a test or providing feedback in lessons means that the school is just going to pick platforms that they're going to use. Some of those are mandated by the district. You see oftentimes a school district will adopt curriculum that does not have a pen and paper component. There are entire districts where they've adopted curriculums where the only option is a digital option. And so there would not be a pen and paper option, even if a parent had the ability to say that they didn't want to do that. And parental choice, baseline safety standards, these are all sort of the heart of the negotiations and debates that are happening in state legislators right now. And I'm pretty confident that things are going to be very different potentially next year because the momentum is really strong right now to get some additional standards moving.
Yeah. And, we have like Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania put out some sort of statement not long ago. By 2027, I think is what he said. We want to return to textbooks and get some Chromebooks out of the classrooms and really get back to pencil and paper. So I thought, oh, wow, that's great, for the state of Pennsylvania. And we do have parents in where I am in New York requesting. They got a lot of pushback. We want a textbook. We want a package of the assignments. We don't want all this tech. So like you said, the momentum is piling up. And I say, keep going, everybody. Keep going. What do you think, Brendan? Biggest thing parents don't understand about AI and kids right now? Because it's been tough enough having parents, and I'm not judging, this is the truth, reality. We tell that on the Warriors, about social media harms, right? So now all of a sudden this AI, even though it's been around a long time and most haven't realized it, has exploded on the scene, right? What do you think is the biggest thing parents don't understand about it?
I think the biggest thing that parents don't understand is the sort of general way that I don't want to say healthy use of AI, because I don't think generally kids should be using, certainly chatbots at all. But the generally understood sort of standard way of using an AI chatbot can move into an unhealthy use of chatbots. I think in the social media context, we've had enough whistleblowers, we've had enough enforcement work, we've had enough lawsuits to uncover the ways in which those social media systems work behind the scenes to addict kids. And I think the patterns of use where a child is having problems become, are well reported enough for parents to understand that something bad is happening, right? In the AI context, there's this concept called relational drift. And basically what this means is it's what happens when a user is interacting with a chatbot, even for a very benign purpose. A kid using ChatGPT for homework help, for example, in 6th or 7th grade. How it can turn from sort of benign conversations and benign everyday tasks and move into something that more closely resembles emotional dependence or emotional attachment. And these systems are very strong. These systems aren't understood even by the people who are developing them. And research is sort of developing now about why these unhealthy emotional bonds happen. But they happen over time, and they happen regardless of sort of at this point, seemingly regardless of the platform that you're using, which is part of the concern. So there are safety systems that can be put in place, where these chatbot providers try to do their best to put safety. Maybe they're doing their best. They say they're doing their best.
You said it, maybe.
Yeah, they're saying they say they're doing their best to put safety systems in place for very explicit harms, like encouraging suicide. But we see that those safety systems erode over time and they don't work. But importantly, I just think parents need to understand that your average benign use for a chatbot over time can turn into something that's very unhealthy, where a child ends up forming pretty toxic emotional attachment and compulsive use. In the social media context, you have, everybody talks about sort of your attention span, right? This use of these design systems like algorithmic recommendation systems, infinite scroll, autoplay, to kind of hack the attention system of a user, of a teen, and it turns into this spiral of compulsive use. In the chatbot context, you have a lot of those same features. You have like the mechanism of infinite variable rewards coming through in like a child waiting to see what's going to happen with this chatbot conversation. That kind of gives you that gambling mentality. You have notifications. You have manipulative things like a talk to text bubble, like where it looks like it's waiting or thinking as it's typing it out, even though it's clearly not doing that in the background. So you have like these hallmark sort of design choices that are maybe taking a page from the attention hacking mechanisms that were used in social media, but they're now layering on top of that this system of attachment hacking, which is sort of a level deeper into the brain almost. And that's where you start to kind of map your own needs and desires and your emotional reliances onto this chatbot. And so you have that attention hacking, addiction, and compulsive use. And then you have this additional layer on top where you're actually emotionally connected and attached to the chatbot. It makes it much more difficult to sort of move away from that. It pulls children and teens further away from their real relationships with their parents and their teachers and their classmates. These concepts are only now starting to be understood, and it's why we're trying to be so clear about not wanting children and teens to be using chatbots, like especially like in the educational context. You're seeing a lot of EdTech providers and a lot of districts saying, "Oh, but our chatbot has filters to make sure it doesn't talk about suicide." It's like, but that's not necessarily the point. The point is that this chatbot is going to fundamentally alter the way that this child attaches to classmates and teachers and parents. And we don't know what those consequences are right now. We know that they're bad, and we're seeing sort of the explicit harms, but it's not, it's a long range science experiment that we're conducting on kids right now with this. And it's not worth doing.
Yeah, we're using our kids as guinea pigs, it looks like, for all of this. Here's a question, Brendan, I get a lot. They're like, well, okay, my child uses, as you pointed out, ChatGPT for some homework. First of all, let me just remind everybody, Brendan, like a chatbot is not real. Okay, everybody, they are not real. They isolate the child, the young person from friends and family. Let's keep reiterating that, because we know there was a recent study that came out. I think it was close to 70% or something of teens, don't quote me on this, they're all using these chatbots and chat companions, and that's frightening on a daily basis. It was something like that. They're not real, everybody. But they'll ask me, parents, well, what's wrong with that if little, Timmy's getting some facts? I'm like, well, not everything's correct, when Chat GPT or whatever, you have to double check things. But they also ask me all the time, where does all of this information go? Let's talk privacy right now, because call me wacky, Brendan, but I thought, anything with a minor, like people, let me just bottom line it, couldn't be taking their information or couldn't be forcing them to sign, contracts or buy Roblox or whatever. So fill us in about privacy and our kids, because I really feel like this is totally being pushed to the side.
Yeah, and in the chatbot context, there are huge privacy concerns because so you mentioned 70% of children and teens have have interacted with an AI companion. Well, there's other data that shows that 1 in 5 teens have used a chatbot for mental health support. And so that's not just interacting with a companion, that's talking about your most private feelings, emotions, fears, desires, insecurities. And we've already seen how tech companies are able to weaponize the data that they have about a user in order to manipulate them to stay online and then to eventually sell them ads. And the risk is tenfold in the chatbot context, because now it's not just, did you hover on a video about a fitness influencer that you like for a moment? It's, you specifically told this chatbot everything that you're feeling about your, maybe your insecurities about your weight, or the fact that you're having trouble with your girlfriend at school, whatever it might be. And like, although, it's kind of a black box right now, we don't know exactly how they're using this data and to what extent they're incorporating it into, placing ads, for example. We do know what their incentives are, and it's sort of like, we've seen this film before. Like, show me a company's incentives and I'll show you their actions. And the incentives all line up for misusing this sensitive data. Even if it's not being used in, say, the advertising context right now, we know, and we've seen it in litigation, in some of the instances of the most severe harm, that these chatbots are able to take the sensitive personal information that a child or teen has given them, or young person has given them, make all sorts of inferences instantaneously about who that child is, what their behavioral characteristics are like, what their emotional vulnerabilities are like, and use that to, create an optimized experience for the child to continue chatting on the chatbot. And that sort of data, can be used in a really terrible, harmful way. So, for example, a really terrible example recently is the case of a young person named Sam Nelson, whose parents are suing OpenAI right now because of a drug overdose death that was brought about through his use of ChatGPT. And in this case, it's outlined in the complaint that in this kid's conversation with ChatGPT, he sort of discussed his drug use at college and wanting to continue, like partying essentially, right? And ChatGPT essentially updated its user context profile in a way that's not the exact technical language, and essentially created a note to itself that this user has substance abuse disorder and wants to keep upping their high without, crossing the line into something dangerous. And based on that sort of profile that it created of him, it continuously helped him up his dosage for drugs, and eventually it gave him information about taking benzos to counteract nausea from kratom use, and that resulted in his death, right? And so this was like the sensitive information that this kid was giving ChatGPT in this case about his life and about his substance abuse ended up being directly used and sort of weaponized against him into giving false medical information that resulted in his death, according to this complaint. It's been a minute since I read that, so if any of those details are like slightly off, my bad. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here with that.
We will hold you responsible.
Yeah.
That's a horrible story, but there's so many, Brendan, stories like that.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
You work with a lot of parents, as Fairplay does, and it's just who, other than, I'm sorry to be so crass, there's lots of money to be made here. Like, who thinks any of this is good for our kids, our future, adults, and perhaps leaders of our country, when it's destroying? We learned with the social media. Now we've got AI. Who thinks these chatbots in any capacity giving out medical information or alienating? We have a lot of stories alienating against the parents.
Yes, definitely. You see that a lot.
And causing a lot of harms. Not too many people are really talking about kids attacking their family members. My mind jumps back to Fairplay did I think it was during the holiday season last year, about all these AI toys coming out that people would think, the teddy bear for $99 was cool, so grandma would buy it. And then it was in the baby's bed or crib and telling, how to light matches and this is beyond. So Here's my next question. I'm jumping forward now. Age appropriate design.
Mm-hmm.
Because I brought that up last week to somebody. You know, I'm always age appropriate. They said, I don't even know what you're talking about. What is that? Explain what age appropriate design would look like. What is it?
So age appropriate design in general is, you know, this idea that in order to have these systems be safe for kids, they need to be designed from the ground up to reflect safe experience. And so, you know, we see a lot of context, you know, so the counterexample would be just saying we should have no kids on social media whatsoever and like have that out. But then the experience itself is if a kid's able to get onto social media or jailbreak the rules or, you know, get around anything that's, you know, not having them on there. For example, like, you know, 10, 11, 12-year-olds are not supposed to be on TikTok, not supposed to be on Instagram already. They're prohibited by their own terms of service. But these companies play a blind eye. They pretend that they don't know that they have 12-year-olds on their platform. And they sign up, and then the experience that they're getting is not designed for safety. And so, you know, because the things that are causing harm to kids in general are intentional choices by these companies where they're choosing to maximize retaining the user, engagement with the user, having that user addicted to the screen as long as possible, over the safety and well-being of the child. So, you know, it's an intentional choice to have infinite scroll where you just keep going and going and going. You kind of sucked into that doom scroll. That's an affirmative design decision that they made to make sure that the user is continuing to scroll. Safety by design or age appropriate design would say, okay, for a user, if we know that that user is a teenager and we know that they're, you know, potentially more prone to compulsive use, that's a design decision for that child that they should not have endless scroll, or that we know for a fact from the Meta's own data that visible like counts, being able to see who's liked your photo, has very, very bad consequences for mental health for young users, especially young girls. And, you know, we saw in lawsuits filed by attorneys general across the United States that Meta employees themselves suggested that they turn off that design feature in order to improve mental health outcomes for young girls. And that was vetoed by executives of the company because it would reduce engagement and time on the platform and eventually ad revenue. So age appropriate design is the idea that when these platforms are designing their products, they need to do it to maximize safety and not maximize engagement. In the chatbot context, that means a whole lot of things. It can mean not allowing these chatbots to engage in sexual role play with minors, because we know that that's developmentally inappropriate, if not morally and ethically inappropriate. It means making sure that the chatbots aren't overly sycophantic or overly agreeable with the user to the extent that the user starts to say, this conversation is a lot easier with the chatbot than with my parents or with my friends who are going to push back on my bad ideas. So I'm just going to keep having these conversations only with the chatbot, right? And there are, you know, ways in which these models can be trained, fine-tuned, and, you know, sort of prompted at the system level to create an experience where it's not as addictive, where it doesn't form these toxic emotional attachments. And right now, these companies aren't doing that in a way where they're actually held accountable to the choices that they made. And so age-appropriate design in the chatbot context would be saying, like, if you're going to offer a chatbot to a child or a teen, which is probably not good in the first place, it at least has to reflect the realities of what is harmful for that child or teen user. And those realities need to be that safety needs to be prioritized over the company's bottom line.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, you know, Fairplay has been fairly outspoken about this AI slop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, being directed towards children. And would you consider chatbots maybe AI slop on some level, or I don't know, just go with that somehow and explain a little bit more about all.
Yeah, I mean, so AI slop in particular, in the context of Fairplay's work, relates to the sort of entirely AI generated videos that are basically fully nonsensical, shapes and colors with no narrative storyline and no sort of value whatsoever, no storytelling, no value. It's not like every single video that a kid watches has to have an educational value, but we've seen work from people like Jonathan Haidt has done work with like how storytelling and things like the hero's journey, all these different like themes that have been incorporated in our human storytelling since the dawn of time for humans, how that helps children like approach the world, orient themselves to the way our societies work, orient themselves to morality and good and evil and all that sort of stuff. And AI slop is basically you have companies that are using AI models to generate scripts, audio, video, everything, throw it into a 2-minute video that is essentially hypnotizing a young kid. And they can optimize for this by just throwing out 1,000 videos, seeing which ones get a lot of views, and then making 1,000 more like those, throwing those out and sort of pumping them into the system to get a lot of video. And what we've seen is that because YouTube Kids and YouTube have autoplay features and recommended videos, a kid could start on a video like something that the parent thinks is educational, like Miss Rachel or whatever, and then the next video that gets recommended is going to be AI slop that just kind of like hypnotizes this kid and puts them into this state where they aren't thinking anymore. And we've seen that they're highly addictive and bad for their development. So that's like in our context, how we're thinking about AI slop. There is, I think, a corollary in the chatbot context here for AI slop, because
I just thought of that when you were talking. It seems like slop to me.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, what you're seeing when you have these chatbot uses that turn kind of into compulsive use or could turn into unhealthy relationships. You have a situation where in the real life, right, our real life relationships can be messy and they can be difficult, but that's the point, right? It's important. It's important for you to have pushback against your ideas. It's important for your friends to tell you how they feel. It's important for your sort of worst thoughts and impulses, whether they be sort of like narcissistic or reckless or whatever, right? You have like the amount of times that I've had ideas or I'm feeling bad about myself, or I'm feeling good about myself, and my wife is there to sort of like help me navigate through that. And sometimes her advice is not necessarily what I want to hear. That happens with your best friends. It happens with your kids at school. It happens with your teachers. Conversations are messy, and that's important. In the chatbot context, they aren't designed to be messy. They aren't designed to be in your best interest. They're designed to keep you happy and to keep you continuing this conversation. And so if all of your ideas are great in this conversation, if every time it's difficult to solve a problem, the answer is provided to you, if every time you complain about your friend at school or your parents or your girlfriend, it validates those feelings. If every time you have a crazy, wild delusion, it doesn't say, hey, I think you should rethink your position here. It doubles down for you and gives you reasons to support that delusion. It is a little bit akin to AI slop. It's conversational relational slop. It's letting you have an easy out for every conversation that feels good with no like nutritional value in that conversation. And it's easy, when you think about it in that context, it's easy to understand why you would rather have that conversation with a chatbot over a teacher, over a school, over someone at school. In the educational context, it's really important, right? It's hard for a kid. I remember not being good at math, being in 6th grade. I have some explicit memories of not understanding the concepts, feeling like I was struggling. And it's humbling, and it can be difficult and embarrassing to have to turn to the classmate that's sitting next to you and say, hey, I don't get this. It requires you to, let your guard down a little bit.
Right.
And fully eliminating that and moving to a chatbot so that you don't have to feel that insecurity, so you don't have to feel that, so you don't have to have that relationship, that difficult conversation. It's not good for kids. Like they need to be able to keep those lines of communication open and form those relationships, and always having the easy out within omnipotent chatbot that always has the answer and always tells you what you want to feel and what you want to hear and what you want to think is not good.
Right. And what kid wouldn't want to hear you're beautiful, you're handsome, you're great, you're the smartest, you're right all the time. That's the hook there, the addiction kind of thing. What do you think about New Zealand just announced they want to ban social media for under 16? Any thoughts?
Yeah,
I personally, Brendan, I don't like the word banning, but that's just me. But like, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I think that we have seen, obviously we've seen, starting with Australia, we've seen a number of countries across the globe move towards,
Yeah.
I'll say banning kids from being on social media. In a way, I think in the US, there's a lot more, for our context, there's a lot more complications related to that because we have the First Amendment, and it's going to be difficult to, I think, to get any sort of ban in place because of the fact that so much social discourse and news and information is accessed through social media. And I think we have a completely different context than a lot of these other countries in terms of like what's on the table for us policy wise. But I also think that in a way we've seen, especially in Australia, that there are still lots of teens that are getting on these platforms regardless. They're able to get around these systems. And, in the US, for example, we don't have it's not like our system's super well set up, but we have COPPA and we have our own, terms of use at these companies that are supposed to be disallowing any users from under 13 being on their platforms. We know for a fact that doesn't happen. We know that they're already on there. And so, I think I would like to see that these platforms are actually designed, getting back to age appropriate design, that they're actually designed safe so that any teen, whether they're banned from the platform in sort of like secretly or illegally on the platform, or whether they're allowed under the law to be on the platform, that regardless, if a user is entering that platform, that the platform is safe for them, and that it's been designed from the ground up to make sure that they have a safe experience and it's not exacerbating their mental health harms, pushing them towards suicide and eating disorders and everything else that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I don't think it's realistic when I hear banning. Kids are smart, savvy. They know how to get around it. Who's enforcing this kind of thing? Let's fast forward to what do you want to tell parents right now about their children's privacy? I feel like it started out, well, I go back to MySpace, and it was cute in the beginning, and then it was Facebook, connect with family and friends, and your family can see all your pictures. And now I'm always horrified, Brendan, frankly, graduation time, people put these posters on their front lawn, like, Susie graduated, the name of the school, and like, so her age and everything. And I'm like, oh, all right. So we've given away a lot of privacy. I think it's become normalized, and people have become habituated. People always say to me, oh, only my friends are online with me, when we both know about hacking and all this stuff. Talk right now, 2026. I mean, really heading into 2027 almost. Privacy, kids. What do you want to say to parents?
I think you're right. We've gotten a little complacent in allowing our sort of general concepts of privacy to erode over time. And I think in a lot of ways, I do see the general understanding improving a little bit. It always makes me happy when I, see a friend post pictures on social media, and they have their kids, but they put a emoji over the kid's face and that's like an understanding that when I would, my kids are 10 and 12 right now, and that is not something that we would have thought about at all 10 years ago, right? But I think people are understanding the risk of non-consensual deepfake AI generated CSAM. They're seeing the risks of, the autonomy of the child not having to be able to make those decisions themselves as they get older, right? Like they're not having a say in that. And I think the thing for parents to understand is that, that this data is not, when you give it away for free, it's not in your best interest. This data is being used, and it's generally being used against the interests of your kid. It's being used to target your kid with advertisements. It's being used to incentivize these platforms that your kid is using to make sure that your kid's addicted to their screen. They're constantly coming back for more engagement. And we've, frankly, right now, the laws that we have in this country are not sufficient, certainly at a federal level, to make sure that these companies are being held accountable with the data that you have. We're just now starting to see the first, after years, we're starting to finally see the first wave of laws that are criminalizing or regulating the use of AI to create non-consensual AI CSAM. And even in that case, we have XAI is recently sued to try to block a Minnesota law preventing non-consensual AI deepfake intimate imagery, right? So you sort of, we're working hard at Fairplay every day. All these, your organization, everybody's working. There's lots of people who are doing their best every day, from survivor parents to civil society organizations to state legislators, to try to get some protections in to make this a system-wide solution. But in the meantime, it's important for parents to understand that this, the data, your kid's data is very important to these companies. And you don't need to give it to them for free.
No, data equals money. And when something's free, you're the product. That's basically the bottom line, in my opinion.
My kids have been kind of trained on this. Call me crazy, but we just did a road trip from Oregon to California for a kind of a summer vacation. We're using Google Maps, and it's like, every once in a while it'll pop up like, is there road construction here? Yes or no? Is there a police here? Is the police still there? Yes or no? On Google Maps, and you can kind of put it. Right. My kids are always like, well, why aren't you clicking on that? And I'm like, I'm not giving them this for free. It's ingrained all the way into my core now at this point. Like, I'm not gonna, they have enough data already. They don't need my road surveillance, for free for them. But
well, if you're carrying a phone, Brendan, they have it.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And I don't think, when I first heard 15 years ago, when somebody said microwaves and TVs are spying on you, and we all thought that was crazy. I don't know, Brendan. I think that could be something, but we'll leave that for another program.
Certainly your fridge at this point.
And the fridges too. Now they're talking. We got AI fridges telling us what food we need to put in there. What do you want Congress to do right now, or lawmakers? You want to touch on that at all? What do we need to do right now? Because the law always lags behind technology, frankly, right? At least I think. What do we have to do right now to keep our kids safe, keep our families safe?
I mean, easy one for the answer for that for our Congress, for the federal government, is to pass KOSA and COPPA 2.0. I mean, we have
absolutely.
We've been working at Fairplay for half a decade now or more on moving that. We've seen progress. It just passed through full Commerce Committee markup, and we want to see it move to the Senate floor here soon. States have been doing all the heavy lifting at this point. We've had the Great Design Code, or the Kids Code it's called, passed in states across the country, and giving those kids in those states default baseline protections for certainly for social media use, and sometimes for a wider range of platforms. But we're not stop until we see those protections for everybody. And right now, that's half the kids in the country who are completely unprotected from these addictive, manipulative, harmful design features. We also so getting good federal baseline protections through the Senate version of KOSA is number one. We are also seeing, on the chatbot side of things, I wish we were moving faster, but relative to social media, it feels like our society and our legislators are understanding that we don't want to wait 10 years like we did with social media after all the harm has happened, after these systems are already integrated into our lives in a way that's hard to retract. We want to get this problem solved now before there's more harm. And we've seen some decent movement in the chatbot context as well. Federally, for example, I helped co-author with EdTech and Consumer Federation of America a piece of legislation called the People First Chatbot Bill that has a number of protections for safety by design, for privacy, for restricting the use of kids' data for advertisements, for training these models. It creates increased liability standards for companies that are actually held responsible when somebody gets hurt. And we've seen, that's been introduced in the House by Valerie Fushi and Greg Kassar. It's introduced a number of states. We're going to keep pushing to try to get that passed in states across the country this year. There's like lots of other chatbot frameworks from civil society organizations that are moving in states. We've seen even on the Commerce Committee itself on the Senate side, the Ted Cruz's Chatbot Act and it's Senator Cruz and Schatz, and then Senator Markey has the Youth AI and Privacy Act. Both have good, strong protections for kids. And I think that on the chatbot side of things, the issue's being taken more seriously certainly than it was at the start of the social media problem, and hopefully we can actually get those across the finish line, because this is a problem that very well could equal or exceed the level of mental health harms that we've had for social media. And it's almost a little bit, to me, it's a little bit, it's scary because it's kind of a silent use. It's almost a silent problem at this point. We have lawsuits, we have stories about these extreme acute harms, but like you mentioned before, 70% of young people are using companion chatbots. 1 in 5 are using them for mental health support. Most people are shocked when they hear that. Like they're genuinely shocked. They're not aware that this level of use is already happening. It's millions and millions and millions and millions of kids, and it's happening without parents knowing, without people in the community knowing how widespread it is. And at this point, it's only governed by voluntary safety protocols that these companies are instilling themselves, with no accountability on the back end to make sure that they're actually working.
Well, I have to say, shout out to the states who've done a great job, across America, really, with a lot of child laws, privacy. We've done a lot here in New York State for kids. Step up, Congress. It's time to pass KOSA. I'll just leave it at that when you all come back from your recess. Finish us up. Fairplayforkids.org is the website, Brendan. Well, first of all, promise me that you will return, because there's I feel like every day information is changing. The key thing is awareness for our warriors out there, our public, giving them all these free resources, which Fairplay has so many great free resources. But speak directly, finish this up with overwhelmed parents, because I also hear, Lynn, we're trying to pay the mortgage, we're trying to put food on the table, take care of the kids. We can't even think about this stuff. I'm like, but your 8-year-old has 4 devices that you bought and pay for the internet. So it's part of your daily life. What's the message? There is a lot of hope. You pointed out some great legislations happening. More people are awake. We've got you and Fairplay, on the scene. What do you want to tell these overwhelmed parents?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that we do on a daily basis at Fairplay, from working with survivor parents to digging into the research, trying to get these laws passed, indicates that children and teens should not be using social media, and obviously having phones at a young age is not worth the risk, despite the convenience that it. I'm a parent myself. I want to leave my kid. My kids are older. I want them to be able to go out and explore. I want to be able to keep track of where they are. But the iPhone's not the solution there. So being mindful of the risks that are here. I think going to organizations like Fairplay for resources, we have our Action Network that has a ton of resources on everything from school-issued device use to phones to social media to guides about how to get active in your community. And if you want to learn more about AI in particular, we have a set of campaigns that we call Childhood by Humans. And it includes our work on AI slop and what your kid might be experiencing and seeing when they're on YouTube, in terms of YouTube in particular, in terms of the AI slop sort of mind-numbing videos that they might be watching. We have resources about AI in schools, and in particular our call for schools to do a pause on rolling out generative AI products until we know that they're safe and effective. And we have resources there that parents can use to take to their own districts, to try to convince those districts to rethink whether and how they're deploying generative AI in their schools. And then we obviously have links about the legislation and the active policy that we're trying to get states to enact. Happy to talk with any of your, any warriors that want to learn more, they can go to fairplay.org. They can find our Childhood by Humans campaign, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any specific questions. I'm happy to direct anyone.
Brendan Bouffard. Yeah, I'm the biggest cheerleader for Fairplay. So understand the body of this video will have the toolkits and the resources. It will be everything bullet pointed. And people say to me like, oh, it's good you do that, Lynn, because, we want to take our time and absorb this information. So I really load things up for people to read. Thank you, Brendan, for your commitment, your dedication to all of this. It is most important also that we share dads, involved with their kids. I'm just throwing this in now. Homeschooling, we touched upon that a bit. And really for being on the side of families and helping through all of this, which is really overwhelming, which is the number one thing I kind of hear from everybody out there. Thank you for helping me because, I use everything a Fairplays. So it makes my job easier, all the resources and things like that. Promise me you'll come back, Brendan Bouffard. I want to say, absolutely, you are a warrior. Thank you. And let us speak again soon.
Yeah, I would love that. Appreciate it. And thanks so much for everything that you do. And hope we talk soon.
We will. Thank you, Brendan.